So we just heard something about the big data, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so many things in the previous panel. And a person like me who is not from the IT, I could at least grab a couple of things from the conversation. And I'm pretty sure that was really good information given to all of us here by our panelists. And I would like to thank once again to all our first round of panelists to give that information.
I will prepare, and someday my chance will come. A famous quote by Abraham Lincoln. The success or failure of any endeavor depends on leadership. Now more than ever before, we need leaders in our organizations and in our world. Great leaders create and communicate a vision and move people into action to achieve. They ignite our passion and inspire us to do our best. With these wonderful lines, I'd like to introduce our main speaker for today's workshop. She holds a PhD from University of Chicago and was the faculty of University of California, Berkeley for 10 years. She has also been a dean at Golden Gate University, San Francisco, and served as Chief Operating Officer of the California Institute of Integral Studies.
She's currently president at Change Management Consulting and Training, LLC, and leads the CMCT India practice. She's an expert in the change management and cross-border dimensions of working globally and frequently speaks for groups who work and manage in global companies or companies with a multicultural and international workforce.
She helps individuals, teams, and organizations adapting to change and at bridging and leveraging cross-border and mindset differences. Her clients include Fortune 500 technology companies, as well as companies of varying sizes in a wide range of other verticals.
I would like to invite Dr. Karine Schomer to inspire all of us and talk about how we can maintain our leadership compass in the midst of the technology and the global complexity. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to Dr. Karine Schomer.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that was not mentioned in the introduction, which has to be mentioned right now, is that, of course, I speak Hindi. So let's do it right. Namaste. बड़ी खुशी है कि मैं आज आप लोगों के साथ मिल सकती हूँ इस कार्यक्रम के लिए. All right, so now as a way of getting into our topic, let me tell you a story, my story. For some reason, I've had a life that's been connected with India at every point. I grew up in a family of civil rights activists, hearing tales of Gandhi and of India's independence movement. At age 21, I went to India for the first time to teach French in a Mumbai high school. I returned to India again and again in the course of my academic career at the University of Chicago, the University of California, and elsewhere. Never in those days would I have imagined the amazing story of India's business and professional involvement in Silicon Valley, or the spectacular transformations that have been taking place in India in the past few decades. I also would not have imagined what I've been doing for the past 15 years. Goodbye, academic research professor and college dean. Hello, management consultant, executive coach, team advisor. Goodbye, undergraduate classrooms, faculty meetings. Hello to helping companies in the India-US business nexus adapt to change and bridge cross-cultural differences. So much change in such a short period of time. Perhaps the Sanskrit saying captures it all. Sarvam anityam. Everything is impermanent. Or in the language of Urdu poetry, waqt ke saath har cheez badal jati hai. But here's the other side to the picture of constant change. Even as our personal lives, our countries, our technologies, our business models, and our cultures keep changing, and never faster than is happening right now, there's some inner things we need to hold on to in a steadfast way if we're not going to be completely disoriented in the midst of all this constant change. Disoriented as individuals, disoriented as leaders of teams and organizations, disoriented like a compass that is so disturbed by a powerful magnetic field that it can't point north anymore. So I'm here to talk with you today about how you can strengthen your personal and team leadership and not be disoriented in the midst of today's technological and global complexity. And I believe we need to discuss this from a philosophical as well as a practical perspective, because leadership is about reflection as well as action. Or to use the language of Buddhist philosophy, leadership involves skillful means and right action, but at the root, it's about right thinking. So we're going to slow down a bit and be reflective, think about things in depth, but I promise also that you'll leave with several concrete suggestions that you can start to apply. Now, the reason I accepted this invitation to talk about this topic today is because I think it's important for us to keep in mind that every technological and business innovation has human implications. And these human implications need to be addressed if we are to make these innovations work for us instead of overwhelm us. Many years ago, long before words like hyper-personalization and the Internet of Things were even on the horizon, my parents had a wonderful cartoon fastened to their refrigerator. It showed a man and a woman seated on a couch in their home, surrounded by the latest technology of those days. And in the caption, the man says to the woman, "I'm afraid everything in this house is more sophisticated than we are." I think this is true of most of us today, even for those of you who develop the new technologies or devise the new business models and the marketing approaches, let alone for the millions of us who use the technologies or are passively impacted by them. Everything is more sophisticated than we are. Or, to use the language of evolutionary psychology, we have Stone Age minds, but we have to function in a space age universe. So with that context, we're going to talk about 4 big interrelated issues that you probably deal with in your daily roles as leaders, managers, members of teams that work globally at the front edge of technological innovation, issues that are a challenge to maintaining your internal compass. So at your tables and at your seats, you'll find a 2-sided sheet of paper that outlines these 4 issues. And since we've only got 1 hour, and this is a very large group, we're not going to be able to have audience comments and audience questions while we go along. So I suggest what you do is jot them down on your handout, and then at the end we'll have a general discussion in which you can share your thoughts. So if everybody has these cheat sheets on which they can take notes, I have a question to ask you. तैयार हैं? ठीक है, शुरू किया जाए. This first issue I want to look at with you is the whole relationship between our technological tools and us as human agents. The 10,000-foot philosophical view, the big picture within which we try to exercise leadership over our own lives and to carry out the leadership responsibilities we have towards others. This big picture is the ever-accelerating growth of our information technologies, the immense power of these technologies, our ever greater dependency on them, and how they have changed and continue to change how we live, how we work, how we communicate, how we connect with others. Everything you're talking about at this conference today is significant not only in terms of technological innovation and business opportunities, it also has huge implications for us as humans. Economic, social, psychological, political, environmental. Many of these impacts are, of course, very positive, but there's also a shadow side to today's innovations. Like all human innovations throughout history, These latest big thing technologies have human costs as well as human benefits. Some of you today maybe have read Evgeny Morozov's recent book, To Save Everything, Click Here. Anybody read it? To Save Everything, Click Here. Evgeny Morozov is at Stanford this year. He criticizes Silicon Valley technologists for having a single solution to every human problem: more use of the internet. He sees this as a subset of a broader problem, which is our habit of looking for the single right answer to problems. It's what he calls solutionism. The point I want to emphasize here is that he challenges us to consider the fact that there are many issues that really can't be solved with a technological fix, but can only be solved through human relationships and the messy processes of social and political debate. And then there's another book. Have any of you read Jaron Lanier's latest book, Who Owns the Future? He's over on the Berkeley side of the Bay. What he argues is that big data is creating large-scale concentration of wealth, that the economics of the free internet is destroying middle-class jobs and diluting intellectual property, and that social media entrap us even as they appear to be serving us. Big issues. Big questions. They're the present-day version of the human versus machines debates that have gone on since the start of human history, but with new urgency because the machines are so powerful and the stakes are so high. Now, most of you here today achieve and make your living through technological innovation, and I would guess that, like me, you're excited about all the amazing new capabilities and solutions that technology brings us. But I would also guess that somewhere in your hearts, you probably know that technology, as wonderful as it is, isn't the answer to everything. And you may even, like me, be a bit ambivalent about where all the big technological ideas are taking us as a species. Do we really want hyper-personalization to feed all of us a constant stream of ads specifically designed to limit our choices to what big data crunching through our personal information thinks we want? That's the question that was raised by somebody earlier this morning. Do we really think that the algorithmic trading that drives the stock market is the best thing for the health of our financial system and for our investments? Do you really feel comfortable with the idea that our national security surveillance is on autopilot, as the Secretary of State recently said? Do we really look forward to a future in which machines surpass human levels of intelligence and activity, and we become either redundant or kind of cyborgs? Do we really find it a total pleasure to be connected to our work anytime, anywhere through our mobile technology? Do we really like being on 24/7, 365? And do we really think it's fine for the development of our kids that they spend an average of 7.5 hours a day on digital media? Let me do an informal poll here. How many of you are completely positive about the technological future without any reservations or concerns? Few? How many of you are positive but have some concerns? And how many of you are pessimistic and quite concerned? A few. Okay. So you may ask, what does all this have to do with leadership? It's that leadership isn't about technological sophistication. It's about human understanding. It's about human values. It's about human goals. It has to do with wisdom about all the human dimensions of what you say and do. It's about motivation, inspiration, insight, imagination, empathy, connection. It's about all the human consequences of your words and your actions. It's about all the so-called soft things. You know, the soft things, which if you really stop and think about it, are much more difficult to get right than all the so-called hard things. We know from repeated experience that over-reliance on technology without taking into account the human dimension can lead to all sorts of problems. There's the classic story of the driver who blindly follows his GPS instructions even though he can see with his very own eyes that he's heading right into a monster traffic jam. Been there, done that? Yes. Or the equally classic organizational scenario of an ERP implementation or other technical change projects running into problems because of an overemphasis on the technology and an underestimating of the human dimensions of the implementation. And for all the accidents that our advanced technologies have helped prevent, there are disturbing cases like the Asiana Flight 214 crash a while back here, where the key factor was the pilot's reliance on automation rather than trusting their own sight and skills to fly the plane to safety. What I'm getting at is that in spite of all our fascination with the power of technology, including the promise of artificial intelligence, we really need to respect, to nurture, to cultivate, and use the intelligence that exists between our ears. The intelligence of that 3-pound, 100 billion neuron human brain that has been called the most complex object in the known universe. Our human intelligence has so many dimensions other than the logical and mathematical dimensions we can program into our technological tools. And each of our brains is shaped by the uniqueness of our experience, our upbringing, our education, our individual psychology, our social relationships, our vision, our imagination, all the wonderful individual quirkiness that goes into making each one of us a unique human being. Artificial intelligence can do all sorts of amazing things and will do more in the future, but I think it's really perverse and frankly suicidal to think, let alone hope, that it could or should be anything more for us than a magnificent tool. There are many voices speaking today warning us that the automation of everything is going to have and is already having some pretty serious human consequences. Not just the obvious consequences of disrupting livelihoods, but something we wouldn't have imagined. That as we rely more and more on computer technology to do more and more of our work, much of our work is reduced to monitoring computer screens. We monitor monitors, and we are in fact, in certain ways, becoming de-skilled. Our tools should be our servants, not our masters. And they should be developed and used in ways that support our human goals, our human values, our human needs, not in ways that undermine them. We should see them as instrumentalities, not be submissive to them. We need to be the agents, and we need to be in charge. And that's what leadership is. It's about taking charge. It's not something you can abdicate to machines. It's something you do as a human agent in interaction with other human agents, using all the capacities of your human brain, especially the least machine-like of these capacities. So let's turn to our second issue. It has to do with the everyday challenges of staying focused on essentials. Does this image capture a little bit of what your work life is like? Yeah. Though we all tend to live and work this way and consider it normal, there's something out of the balance about the way that the very technologies we've created to make us more efficient can overwhelm us and make us constantly distracted. Here's my own confession about what happens to me when I don't exercise self-leadership to remain focused on my priorities and get lost in technological overwhelm. The time I can fritter away daily initiating and responding to emails, phone calls, voicemails, tweets, and text messages. The time and energy I can spend cultivating my social media presence and browsing my network. The time and effort I can put into selecting, implementing, and troubleshooting software programs. Not to speak of how I can fall for the temptation, especially as a scholar. I can really fall for the temptation of surfing the web constantly in search of one more relevant piece of information and the latest political, technical, financial, and cultural news. And speaking of hyper-personalization, how I can let myself be open to those carefully crafted online ads and things that I might be interested in. Frankly, I wonder how I get anything done. Have you found yourselves that way too sometimes? Sure. Now go and multiply all the personal time you've spent away from priorities by that of all the people that the teams you lead, by all the people in your company, in your industry, and by our entire productive workforce. And what do you get? According to in-depth research on the knowledge economy, 28% of knowledge workers' time in the US is spent on interruptions that are neither urgent nor important. This is an annual cost to the economy of $650 billion. An average employee in a knowledge-based role receives over 350 email messages a week, and employees can spend up to 20 hours a week managing email. Only about 12% of an average knowledge worker's time is spent thinking and reflecting. And it gets even worse when we add our present-day habit of trying to cope with all of this through multitasking. You know, typing up notes from one phone call while talking to somebody else on another phone call, yeah? Writing an email or texting someone while you're in a brainstorming meeting with other members of your team. Checking your stock portfolio online while listening to a presentation. Anybody doing that right now? Or the one that stuns me the most, I know you've seen it. It's you surf the web, check your messages, and have a face-to-face conversation with a coworker or your kid, looking them straight in the eye while your attention is elsewhere. So what's wrong with all this? The neuroscience and the management research on this is clear and unambiguous. Multitasking doesn't work. It's an illusion. You can't really focus on more than one task at a time. What you do is you rapidly switch back and forth between them, never giving any one of them your full attention, never having the satisfaction of doing any one of them excellently. It's the opposite of that wonderful and hyper-productive experience of flow, where you're completely absorbed in what you're doing, you're feeling the energy of focus and the enjoyment of your action. There's a Sanskrit term for that flow. There's a Sanskrit term for everything. Those of you who meditate or practice yoga will know it. It's ekagraha, complete single-minded immersion in the moment. That focused concentration is the best and highest use of our brains. It's what our brains are made for. It's what they feed on. The opposite of ekagraha is perpetual distraction, being unfocused and distracted, what the Buddhists would call monkey mind. When you work with monkey mind instead of ekagraha, your stress level increases, your work quality decreases, you become both less efficient and less effective. The more you multitask and give in to technological distraction, the less you're able to concentrate to learn and accomplish anything significant. I have to share with you my absolutely favorite saying by the Hindi poet Kabir. Ek sadhe, sab sadhe. Sab sadhe, ek jaye. Means do one thing completely, everything gets done. Try to do everything, you lose the one thing. He was very wise all those many, many centuries ago. So if you try to do everything, you lose track of the one important thing. And that's the point of leadership, isn't it? To lead yourself and others, you need to have a vision of what that one important thing is that is essential. You need to be fully committed to it, and you need to stay focused on it in the face of multiple competing demands and distractions. And the good news, though, is that there are ways that we can change our addiction and distraction in both our personal lives, in our roles as leaders and members of teams. And maybe when we have a chance to discuss, you'll be able to tell us some of the ways in which you do it. Issue number 3. It's the fact that our advanced technological world is also a global world, and that while it's one world, it's still very, very diverse. So most of you today, I would imagine, are what we call global professionals, right? I'm one too. So what are we? We're people who work with or in global enterprises. Wherever we're from, we're fluent in English. We have colleagues and counterparts in other countries. We're accustomed to international travel, time zones, projects with players in different parts of the world, virtual meetings with people we've never met in person. We feel that we can be at home both in our native countries and all over the world. We think of ourselves as cosmopolitan, not ethnocentric. Globalization, with all the huge disruptions it has created for millions of people, is generally speaking working out pretty well for us, for our careers and for our business opportunities. Our ways of living, managing, and doing business are modern, westernized, cutting edge. We're cool. We're the future. So where's the leadership challenge? Don't we already have the perfect global mindset? Don't we already have all the right attitudes, knowledge, and skills to lead and manage global and multicultural teams and companies? Ever since Tom Friedman's book, The Earth is Flat, and I know you've all read that one, there's been a common belief that since people are now so interconnected through business and technology, differences are no longer important. I run into this attitude frequently. We're all technologists or finance people or biotech people or lawyers. We speak a common language of our profession. Cultural differences are just a little bit of insignificant local color and noise. But then what happens? In spite of all the intelligence and effort we put into our global undertakings, things don't always work out the way we think they should. Working globally turns out not to be all that smooth and seamless. There's the personal exhaustion of multiple time zones and being on call 24/7 and the wear and tear of travel. Then there's the logistical and legal complexities of dealing with different business and legal systems. And of course, the constantly shifting considerations of risk and opportunity. But in addition, there's layers and layers of cultural complexity. It turns out that the world isn't completely flat. National differences, cultural differences, multicultural diversity, they're all real. And they can trip up even those of us who think we're well prepared. Let me share with you 3 brief stories that will probably resonate with some of your experiences. First, a classic story in business negotiations. An Israeli IT team was presenting an enterprise software overhaul proposal to an established family-owned firm in Brazil. Could just as well have been India. They were enthusiastic about the difference they could make. As they discussed their solution, they became quite vocal in their critique of the Brazilian company's existing systems. They thought they were respecting the intelligence of the potential client by being direct and forthright. You can see what's coming? For the Brazilians' point of view, this was a disrespectful way to speak to a client. You can imagine how that business deal went. Second, a story I hear routinely from US project managers who work with teams in India. It's the virtual teaming meeting at which, having presented a plan or an idea, the leader asks, "Any questions? Any comments?" And what follows is complete silence. Chup, bilkul chup. From the US leader's point of view, the silent means that everybody has understood and is in agreement, right? The team members in India, on the other hand, are waiting to be personally called on to comment, or they don't want to show that they haven't fully understood, or they're hesitant to challenge anything the leader has said, or they're waiting for their local leader to talk on behalf of them. Different assumptions about what's normal that end up creating unnecessary confusion and losses in productivity. My last story is one I hear from global professional friends of Indian background who have had most of their formative educational and work experiences in the US and are presented with a great business or career opportunity in India to be repats, to reverse the brain drain, to go back and build the new India, and to get away from the stresses of present-day America. For all of those who make a success of it, there are countless others for whom the experiment doesn't work. They are too acculturated to how things are done here to really be happy with and adapt fully to how things are done there. They struggle for some time and eventually return to Silicon Valley. So what do such stories have to do with leadership? A lot. For your own self-leadership, it means that you need to have more flexibility, more cultural intelligence, more curiosity, and more empathy with the different kinds of people you deal with. It means you need to avoid the easy path of trying to deal only with people who are like you in organizations that are run like your own Silicon Valley organizations. You need to stretch yourself to deal with people who are different from you in organizations that are run in ways that are different from what you consider normal. And as a leader of teams, what it means is you need to nurture and leverage all the abilities and talents of the people in your team, not only the people who are easiest for you to interact with because they share your mindset. You need to understand that what creates engagement and commitment and a sense of being valued is not one size fits all for everyone. And you need to be skilled in the art of making all your people feel that they belong and that their individual abilities and perspectives contribute to the team's success. And you need to make sure there are possibilities of advancement for everyone, not just for those who are like you or like the company's existing senior leadership. And now, the last of our 4 leadership issues, it's about the importance of cultivating and maintaining human relationships. Real and meaningful human relationships, not just superficial business and professional contacts. I think this image says it all. A group of young women, each engrossed in her own iPhone, all probably checking in on the latest posts from their Facebook friends, not communicating with each other at all. It makes me think of one of the huge differences I've seen over 15 years of doing seminars and consultations for corporate groups. It used to be that when you would come into a conference room, the people who were there already would be getting acquainted, chatting with each other, establishing some kind of personal connection, right? Now everybody comes in, sits down, turns on their screens, gets completely absorbed in email, computer-based tasks, texting or browsing the web. Or you go to coffee shops around universities, which used to be places of lively conversation and debate. And if you're there to actually talk with someone, you're almost made to feel like you're disturbing a study hall. If you haven't read it yet, I recommend yet another book. It's by Sherry Turkle, professor of sociology at MIT, and it's called Alone Together: Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. She describes how we're becoming so addicted to technology-enabled superficial contact with others at a distance that we're losing the ability to have complex and meaningful face-to-face human relationships. The examples she gives would be hilariously funny if they weren't also deeply sad. Parents who are too busy texting to pay attention to their kids, people checking their iPhones during funerals, explaining that they do this in order to, quote, get past the boring parts. Conferences where people mill about looking at their screens instead of reaching out to personally network with other people. I've seen that. Meetings where people pay attention only to what interests them directly and zone out of the rest of the meeting by retreating into their screens. And young people who show up for work or even job interviews wearing headphones that send the implicit message, don't talk to me, I'm busy with something else. Something is clearly out of balance. Our communication tools have increased our ability to be in contact with large numbers of people, but contact isn't the same thing as connection. We seem to be losing the skill, the art, and even the desire for the messy and multi-sensory process of face-to-face conversation and relationships. Our communications are becoming shorter, simpler, more tactical, more like sound bites than mutual exploration of ideas and feelings and points of view. And our relationships are also becoming more thin, lacking all the texture and complexity and ambiguity of our rich individual selves. So why is this a leadership challenge? It's because, as I said at the beginning of this talk, leadership is about leading people, not programming and monitoring machines. It's about connection, relationships, and conversation. Do you remember what President Teddy Roosevelt once said about success? He said, the most important single ingredient in the formula for success is knowing how to get along with people. And here's the rub. The way we tend to structure our business organizations is to reduce things to a strict system of roles, processes, and schedules. The goal is to minimize the human element and create machine-like predictability. And while this promotes a certain kind of immediate efficiency, there's a price to pay. That price is the alienation of employees and managers from one another and from the organization itself, and that often results in a loss of long-term effectiveness. If you look at the lives of people who've been successful at building great businesses, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, Narayana Murthy, Steve Jobs, you'll learn that for each of them, there was a key handful of close relationships cultivated and maintained over the long haul that contributed centrally to their achievements. And if you look at the whole sweep of the history of successful businesses, you'll find that strong personal connections at all levels, from top to bottom, have been and continue to be an absolutely key element. So here you are, trying to be an effective leader in a world of global teams working around the clock in different parts of the world, or in large corporations with thousands of employees, or in a startup that's aspiring to reach markets of millions around the globe, working long days and long weeks to meet tight deadlines and production schedules. You need to have everybody on your team be fully present and engaged so that together you can create the value that will determine your success. You need to have not only perfect coordination of your plans, your processes, your timelines, and your communications, but you need to have everybody committed to the goals and motivated to the team's effort and success. The way you achieve this is through three things. And I can see the pencils coming out because you want to know what those three things are. Relationships, relationships, relationships. By setting the tone and culture of your team so that genuine human connection takes place among team members and with internal and external counterparts. By building relationships that are more than instrumental and tactical. By creating a culture of mutual support for job and career satisfaction. Easy to say, but hard to make happen? Perhaps. Perhaps indeed. As I mentioned earlier, those soft capabilities are the ones that are really the hardest to develop. You don't just grasp them intellectually and then apply them mechanically. They need to become part of your character. They need to become habits of mind and behavior that are second nature to you. The art of building relationships is not a recipe or an instruction manual. It's a lifelong practice. So we've talked today about 4 big ideas that can help you maintain your internal compass and help the teams you lead maintain theirs. We've talked about ensuring that your technology that our technology serves us rather than us serving it. We've talked about staying focused in the midst of technological and multitasking distractions. We've talked about how to function in the global world in a way that recognizes and works with cultural differences. And we've talked about how to succeed by cultivating positive human relationships. But you know, as well as I do, that ideas without action don't lead to change. Unless you find a concrete path to implementing these ideas, all you'll have from today is a memory of a thought-provoking conversation. So before we open the floor for discussion, I want to make you an offer, especially those of you who work in executive, managerial or team leads. If you're serious about wanting to implement some of these ideas for yourself and your teams, I'd like to invite you, this is an offer, to sign up for a 30-minute complimentary consultation with me, free, confidential. Every one of you who's interested. It will be an opportunity for you to discuss your specific challenges in these leadership areas and explore how the ideas we've talked about today can make a difference in the world of your work. It's an opportunity for me to hear more about your firsthand stories and for you to see how I would go about addressing them. And we'd be able to see if we're a good match working together, and if you'd like to explore working with me further, we could do it on the phone in the next couple of weeks. No obligation whatsoever. I really want to offer this to you. This is a community I love and have worked with for a long time. And so any of you who are interested, I welcome you. So you'll probably see at each of your tables, there's a clipboard, and there's also a clipboard circulating on the sides. If you are interested in this, jot down your name, your email address, your phone number, and I'll contact you in a few more days. So while these clipboards circulate, I'd like us to get into the general discussion of the ideas you've heard today. Maybe you've been jotting down some of your thoughts. Now it's time for me to hear from you. So here's the question. How can what we've talked about today make a difference in your work and leadership? And on any one of these 4 areas, I invite whoever has something to say to break the ice and to start talking about how these ideas can be of value in your own professional and leadership roles. And I think we have mics that can go around. It'd be great if each person who speaks will stand up so that everyone can hear them properly.
There you go.
Thanks. That was a very inspiring talk. I think one thing that I can take away is that the example of looking at my iPhone, looking at my Android-based device, etc., and not really focusing on the people around me. I think that's something I would consciously try to avoid in the future.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Sri. I remember a famous quote by Mahatma Gandhi. If you change the way you look at things, the things that you look change. So that's more within you on how you perceive and what you experience. And as a leader, we always expect things like, I am telling you, you do this. So this is what I expect from you. Whereas I've seen, we are all learning every day, and what I hear is, how can I enhance your productivity? That's what the leader should look into the team, so that the team is following the leader and for a successful, productive, anything for that matter.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ivy Millman. You talked about the idea in distractions and focus that we only spend about 12% spent on actually being productive and doing work. And I was wondering if there was any connection between that and the 4th section of building relationships. That if somehow we improved relationships, that we might be able to actually improve our productivity and thinking.
That is an extremely good point. I don't know if everyone heard it clearly, but I think if I heard it right, what she was saying was that by improving relationships, we can also deal with the problem of spending too much time on our technology. In fact, I think you've probably all seen the kind of situation where people are using the technology and just wasting a lot of time trying to solve a problem, which walking down the hall, picking up the phone, and talking with somebody you have a good relationship with can solve it much better. Yeah, thank you for that.
Hi, my name is Shankar Sitarama, and I can very well correlate to the 4th one, context versus human relationships. My daughter, whenever she goes on a marching band trip to play in other schools, she keeps telling me that how things have changed now, that the moment the bus starts, within 5 minutes, everybody is onto their devices. There is no singing, there is no, that kind of stuff that we used to have whenever we went on field trips. All of that is gone these days. But I think you make a very valid point in terms of the human relationships, and I've seen this in many of the teams that we do, virtual teams. The feedback and the kind of response and the productivity that we gain by having one face-to-face kickoff session or some kind of a jamming session with all the members, and then later on continuing that with virtual mode, I think brings a whole lot of improvement in terms of productivity. I just wanted to share that. Wanted to get your thoughts on how do we, some of the other things that we can try to actually use some of those things in our actual meetings.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, because of course we're not talking about how we should throw away all these wonderful communications technology. They're much too valuable, and when properly used with human ends in mind, they can actually contribute to extremely good personal relationships. But I think what you've pointed to is the crux of it, which is that you need to somehow have sufficient face-to-face relationships so that the virtual and distance technologically mediated relationships have got some kind of ground on which they're based, and you're not just strangers who've never met each other. So thank you for that.
In the interest of time, I would probably, give 3 more people to have this discussion continued. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Nilesh Kapse, Three Keys Communication. Just yesterday, I was discussing this with my business partner. She's just about 27 years old, grooming her to take over the business here in the US. And she came up to me and told me that why are all my projects failing? Something is going wrong somewhere. And that visual, the second one, was so true. She was operating on 4 computers, and I said, shut down 3 of them, just take one into the picture, and you'll see that all your projects will fall into line. It's such a valid thing that you need to focus on what is there, and that was what I implemented just yesterday. It was so fresh in my mind. Thank you.
So you'd better quote Kabir to her.
Hi,
Go ahead, please.
yeah, my name is Amar. I have worked as a project manager for quite a long time in IT. So the last one I can very well connect. So there are like phone calls where people are talking and they are really very hostile. Like I am hostile at them, or they are hostile at me over some issue. But when you pick up the phone and talk to them one-on-one, and better still that if you go to them in person and talk to them, I see all the barriers melts away, okay? And I have seen many critical situations like where lots of action items, mails never yielded result, but just one conversation actually get a buy-in from that person, yes, I will do it for you. I think as a leader, we should always try to practice that, how we connect with people at different level, different culture, and we change our communication to based on their context. I think that will yield the most result.
I would like to just say one thing, which is that, and I can say it to this audience, which is I think that those of you who have an Indian cultural background have actually got a cultural advantage in this because of the relationality of Indian culture. And often when I'm doing workshops with mainstream American teams, I need to teach them some things about relating, which are sort of more second nature in this very relational Indian culture. So what you're talking about rings completely true. Yeah.
So one last discussion, please.
Hello, my name is Rishi. And for the last one, context versus the human relations, I wanted to bring out Pareto's principle. When looking at it from a logical perspective, it's really hard from like Target's view to say that, okay, I want to take this consumer basis and I have 100% of people, I can't reach all my marketing team over there. But the true idea of Pareto's principle is that it's the 20-80 rule, meaning 20% of your results, 20% of your work gives 80% of your results. Thus, you don't need to go to everybody. So even though it doesn't look from a logical perspective that you can reach the entire customer basis, there is only 20% you need to reach. And when you put your human relations there, I believe it is possible.
Very good. Yes.
If you want 2 more people.
2 more people? Okay.
They really want to talk to
2
you.
more.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Hey, Karen. My name is Prasad. I'm a technology startup founder. I really believe in what you said as a person. I believe in my heart. But from a company perspective, it doesn't make sense to me as a technology startup company. So I negate each of the point in my company. So my question is, how are technology startups dealing with these kinds of issues? Because as a founder, I believe in my heart that these are true. But when I come to implement it from a company perspective, as a founder, as a CEO, I cannot really go against this because these are the building blocks of my company. So I believe that we are actually going in a trend where we just have to sustain and believe that this will phase out in a few years or a few decades. So what is your comment on that?
You're really in that point of dilemma of leadership where you can see the impacts of how things are being done, but the way things are being done is what leads to the financial and business success. And so I think in a sense you have to live with this contradiction and try to manage it as best as possible. It's not something that's going to get solved. You're just going to learn to manage it and mitigate it in whatever ways and try to see the openings for doing things in a different way. But there's no silver bullet. Talk to me some more afterwards.
Thanks so much.
And just to remind here again that as she already mentioned, probably you can have some consultation with her after this conference so she can guide you more. Okay, one more last.
Okay, my name is Julia Lee. I'm the IT project lead. So from my experience working with the overseas team, I normally use the WebEx to talk to them. And also during the meeting, I will call each developer to make sure they understand what I say. And I found out for some reason, if I use like a Skype or Facebook or something to have a small talk individually after the meeting or something, their productivity or their focus on my project gets much better. So I think in the technology age, we use the right, we can use the technology to help us to do the communication overseas, but also when I found they were talk too much during their work, I'll tell my manager to stop to log into the Skype so often. So then their productivity increased a lot. So it's kind of trade-off. We have to monitor when to use the technology, when to limit, restrict the technology. Thank you.
Excellent comment, and I would like to really invite you to be an expert at one of my next workshops where I try to teach people about how to do those kind of things. So it looks like Khana tayar hai. Okay.
Before even we talk about that, I had a very different speech for her to give her a thanks, but what I can do is, आज से पहले आज से ज़्यादा खुशी कभी भी मिली नहीं. आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. बिल्कुल traditional Indian style से. I was thinking to say her thank you, but I think she deserves this. शुक्रिया.
Mind doing an interview?
And thank you very much, Dr. Karine. And I got a phrase from your workshop, monkey-minded, and I like the phrase, and which reminded me a funny story, which I would like to share with you all. So it goes like once upon a time, there was a tourist who went to a pet shop, and he was just looking at the cages in that shop. One of the customers walked in, and he took one monkey from the cage, and he paid $5,000 for that monkey. The tourist asked, why is it $5,000? I mean, we can get monkeys from just a couple of hundreds. Why is it $5,000? So the shopkeeper said that this monkey can code in C. He can do tight coding without any bugs. So the tourist accepted. He looked upon other cage, and there was a tag with, on the monkey with $10,000. He asked the shopkeeper, why is it for $10,000? The shopkeeper mentioned that, well, this monkey can code in C++ and sometimes in Java. So that tourist was startled after seeing these price tags on those monkeys. When he saw the third monkey with a price tag of $50,000, he was amazed, and he said to the shopkeeper, why the hell in this world is this monkey costs $50,000? The shopkeeper just said politely, well, I don't know, but both of these monkeys called him the boss.
So you know the value of the leadership now.
Yeah.
Thumbs up to all the leaders. I would like to call Sanjay on stage to please give a vote of thanks to Dr. Schomer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, ma'am.